Hello and welcome to another episode of Mortgage Video Mastermind, where we bring you professionals who share insight into the latest trends, tips, industry, technology, and services to help you create more videos to use in your mortgage business. Well, hey there. Happy Friday to everyone. And we want to welcome you to our Mortgage Video Mastermind Friday live call. My name is Ginger Bell. And I have our usual suspects with us, Scott, Jay, Jason Frazier, and our guest today, who is joining us from the East Coast, in the metropolitan area of DC, Fobby, Naghmi. So thanks so much for joining. Happy Friday, guys.
Thank you, Ginger. How you guys doing?
Doing great. Doing great.
I'm not used to being on the other side of asking questions, just FYI. So I feel like I should be asking you guys questions right away.
He starts in right away.
Right. Hey, how you all doing? What's going on?
Well, that's one of the things having a show like this, because all of us have our own shows. And so being able to really pull this together is great because we all know how to ask questions, answer questions, and fill in the blank.
Sure.
And so one of the things, and we were having a conversation before we started, which I think we'll just get back into. But, I invited you on, Fobby, because you have done a phenomenal job in doing a podcast, which is different than video, but it has a lot of the same premise. And so I know you were blaming Frazier for that whole thing and starting.
That's a whole other podcast. We should have one podcast called Blaming Frazier.
Oh. There'd be a lot of guests. We'll
be booked up for 2 seasons. I know that.
At least.
Sounds like a real sitcom to me. So good. So let's talk about that because, part of what in getting into doing something consistently. And I think that's a lot of it in doing, whether you're doing a video, whether you're doing a series, whether you're doing like this on a live or a podcast, it's that consistency that is so important. So tell me about what you're doing on your podcast, first of all, and what started it. So again, blaming Frazier.
So on my podcast, it's called Laugh, Lend, and Eat. And it was kind of something that I started with the name, quite honestly, because I wanted to have kind of like my core values, right? So laughing, lending, and eating. They said find 3. I couldn't put family in there. Unfortunately, I would if I could. But so start off with that, with the name first, and then really we wanted to just have conversations with people inside the industry that could kind of add value to someone's day if they listen to that podcast for a couple of minutes, right? I want them to be able to take a nugget out of there, something interesting, something valuable that they could actually apply. From there, actually moved into where we began to see different uses for this podcast. And all of a sudden, we were having people that were not industry. So we had people that were marketing experts, branding experts. We had David Gendelman, who's an international meditation guru,
Cool.
And he came on the show and we talked about how meditation and breathing exercises during work can, make your day go. So we've been expanding and kind of seeing where we fit in. And to your point also, by the way, the podcast is also broadcast on YouTube. So
Right.
There is an element of video in the podcasting that my friend John Perry, by the way, if he's listening, thanks to you. He's the one who said, hey, Five, you should do videos of this the whole time and not just do audio only. And we've been actually able to use those little video clips to repost them later on as little collaterals here and there. So
Right.
it does work, And so I think that's where I see the podcast, quote unquote, video cast kind of going.
Right. Well, and to, take the little snippets to Gary V it, if you will, because that's one of the things that he does is important. So, even though you have something that may be a 30-minute, and your podcasts are not just 30 minutes. Some of them are probably close to an hour for some of them, right?
Yeah. We like to talk. We like to dig deep. So by the way, you should be ready, Ginger, when you come on in a few weeks. we have a pretty good team now of people who do research for me, and they actually go out and find stuff that's pretty interesting to talk about. So I do like that fact that We're not just kind of limited to 20 minutes. You're in and out, which does serve a purpose also. But we do like to dive in deeper and find out things about the person. Like I think one of the most interesting conversations, obviously. One of them, I think, was with Barry Habib when he talked about how he was selling speakers out of the back of his truck after college.
Yeah.
I mean, how often are you going to have Barry tell you that kind of story? So we had that time frame to allow for that.
Right. Well, and I think the length, people always ask in video, is there a perfect time? And I mean, there's a perfect time based on your message, but depending on what you're talking about, as long as you are providing value and information and entertainment, then and you're keeping them engaged and interested, then that's the perfect time.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't have to be, 20 minutes for a podcast. If you're digging in deeper and you're getting the information and it's entertaining to people and engaging, then that's the perfect time.
Exactly. I agree with that. And it's all about content and what people are looking for.
Right. So, and I want to talk about, if people are thinking about, okay, I need to do video, one of the hardest things for most people is coming up with something to talk about. So topics. And, Fraser, you've done a bunch of different podcasts. And so when you're thinking about who to invite on, what are some of the things that you look at as far as how do you come up with a topic? Is it based, do you find the person first and then it's like build around the topic there? Or do you say, hey, I want to dive into this topic and then you go find the person?
Is that for Jason or for me?
Either one of you or both of you, actually.
Yeah. I'd like to hear Jason's on that because I think he's way more ahead of me than on that.
I thought it was for Fobby, so I wasn't listening to the question. No, I heard it. I'm just joking. No, for me, I like to do a combination of both. I mean, when I started Mortgage X with Christine way back when, we were talking about like, hey, we're just going to have like, people on the podcast, just guests, and do it just like the way everyone else does. But when I did a podcast course to help people learn how to, that wanted to, be on it, do a podcast or host and set it up, the equipment, the training, all of that stuff. I called it I called the combo pizza, right? And that's a difference of interviews, just, doing like a 15-minute riff off of a topic. For me, I get most of my content on what I want to talk about, whether it's the newsletter or whether it's the Mortgage X, which we're actually relaunching today with Christina and myself, just because we took in a hiatus. But I get it from Facebook groups. I get it from the news that I see in like the daily newsletters from like the NBA and other sources, because it gets me thinking about whatever the trending topics are that people are talking about. That's why Facebook groups are so good, especially like the new loan officer Facebook group, my Facebook group, other Facebook groups, and just conversations I see on Facebook of what people are asking or what their concern is. Maybe it's like appraisals, maybe it's just funny stuff, or where I see people going around, like, like addressing like what's the best CRM question, right? So to me, I and Fobby, you could answer this, but like to me, it's like I could come up with a whole bunch of things that I think are interesting, that I think people will want to listen to, but I'd rather go straight to the source to see what they're actually talking about, because I know my content will have a longer shelf life and grow so much quicker and quicker and larger if I'm talking to something that people are talking about right now.
And I'm going to add to that. One thing that I found out, Ginger, is that sometimes I can have a guest on the show, and Sue Woodard was a great example, right? So Sue Woodard was on the show. I had no idea that she had this much information about AI technology. And we started going down that rabbit hole, right? And it was probably one of the most, it was really enlightening episode for me, right? Because there was all this knowledge coming at me from somebody that I didn't even expect it. Right. So here we were going to talk about CRMs, and we ended up talking about AI technology. And so I think getting the right guest on is critical. Having the right topic is critical, but then remaining open to allow the guest to kind of navigate where they want to take the show.
Yeah. So let's talk about that as far as having a guest on and letting them navigate, but also making sure that you're keeping it down a path where it's not just a rabbit. So going down that rabbit hole. Do you have a list of questions, standard questions that you always ask? Okay.
No, I don't have standard questions. I mean, obviously by the time you're going to come on the show, Ginger, we're going to have some questions designed for you, right? Probably around edu marketing, video marketing, that kind of stuff, right? So this is going to be designed for you. If Scott was going to come on the show, I'd probably ask him some different questions. Jason, I would just blame Jason for the entire hour. Have repeated guests come on the show that just blame Jason like for 60 minutes. You know what I mean?
It might have to be a mini series.
Yeah, for sure.
So I mean, it would just depend on the guests. I don't think we have any pat answers. I will say in the beginning, I did something kind of corny, and I stopped doing it after like the 4th or 5th episode. I would ask like, hey, since this is Laugh, Lend, and Need, what's your favorite thing that you got to eat if you're on the road a lot and you come home? And I would ask this question of every guest, and I was just getting different. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to ask that question. It's silly, you know what I mean? Because some people are like, I don't cook. I was like, well, what are you going to do then?
Yeah.
Order out pizza, right? I don't know.
Right.
Chick-fil-A.
Right.
So, okay. So let's go into that, because you have the name for your podcast.
Mhm.
And covering the different areas, laugh, land, and eat. And are you just say, okay, I need to cover each of these three things in every podcast, or is that just your title? Because that's one of the things, coming up with somebody's going to start a show or a series, and Fraser, you guys, yours with the Mortgage X, how do you come up with a name? Is it just something that is like, okay, that's it, we're going to go with it? Scott, with yours, Find My Way Home for your YouTube channel, it's like, how does somebody come up with a name?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it was the core values thing again, Ginger. It was definitely, my friend who's a marketing guy that on the show, just kind of saying, hey, let's talk about what is your core values? What do you like? And the first thing I said is, I love to laugh, right? And then it was just kind of like, I think there was a movie from Julia Roberts. I honestly don't remember the name, okay?
Eat,
but
love,
I know it was
pray.
something. Yeah,
Eat, love, pray. Yeah.
So it was kind of a take off that. So it was like laugh, lend, and eat. And anybody who knows me knows I love to eat. I mean, if you take me to a new town, I want to know the greatest food. If something is greasy, deep fried, I'm eating it, right? That's just my go-to thing. So it was just a combination of those things that I love to do, and lending, obviously, because our focus is around the mortgage industry for the podcast.
Well, and I think finding something too that lends to you, because if you're going to start a series, then it needs to be something that you're going to be able to stick with. So it needs to be, as you think, around your core values that you're going to love doing, because in doing this every single week, and I don't know how many you're recording every week, if you're putting them all out, or if you're just saying we're just doing one a week, whatever you're doing, you have to be able to have that commitment to it, right, to be able to fulfill it, right?
Yeah, I mean, we record every Thursday afternoon now. We have it down to like one day, and we do about 2 shows a month. Sometimes we'll do 3 shows. But I mean, that's really all I can handle with my schedule.
Right.
But I know that I have to continue doing that. I mean, and there is that consistency. And to your point, I mean, I just talked to somebody earlier this morning about this, is no matter if it's a podcast or if it's a post, if it's a blog you're writing, you have to find what drives you to do that every single week. So it can't be, oh, Jason was doing this, so let me do it. Or Ginger did this, so let me do that. If it doesn't turn me on, I mean, I'm going to do it 2-3 times, and I'm like, man, that's too much of a headache. Forget about it, right? Yeah. But if I can find where I kind of fit in, and now this is fun, this is like, okay, I can kind of build from here. Now it's something that I'm going to do consistently with, and it doesn't seem like work now. Now it becomes a passion. You know what I mean? And that's a big difference.
Right.
Well, that was my question for you: is what was your original motivation for starting the podcast, and then did it evolve, and if it did, how?
Yeah, that's a great question. So 2021, so 2015, right? I had this idea. We were doing these, remember that we used to do those live webinars, we used to sign up for them, and then this webinar would start like 1 p.m. in the afternoon or something, try to make so Central, East, and West Coast time. And when people would register and you would talk about whatever you were talking about, right? So I had this idea. I went to my boss with that. I said, hey, how about if I get like someone like, I threw out Rob Christman's name. I remember that. I said, how about if I get Rob Christman to come on the show or the webinar? We'll do this thing. We'll talk to him, and we'll get more people to join the webinar, and we'll get a nice database of possible candidates for recruiting purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you did this initially, it was to grow your business.
Yeah. And then he came back 3-4 weeks later, right? I was working at a really large company at that time, right? It takes 3-4 weeks to get answers. And he said, we thought about it. We don't want another third party representing our company on the show. And so they nixed the whole Rob Christman thing, right?
You were way ahead of the game back then.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know if I was. It was just a thought, but I didn't give it up, right? That's the whole point of the story for me, is I kept trying to push it. Every year I kept pushing it. Finally, in 2019, I did my first one with Christine Beckwith. And I ran into Jason because now it's time to blame Jason, right? And I'm like, Jason, I can't seem to do this podcast thing. I keep hearing about this podcast. He said, oh, man, it's simple. All you got to do is take the audio of your webinar, shoot it up, and now you got a podcast. And literally, that was the whole premise of Laugh, Lend, and Eat. I mean, there's nothing beyond more than that. It's like I wanted to get the name out. I wanted to actually, it's a way of getting my name, getting the brand out there, right? It's about getting people talking about us. I've had plenty of people literally text me on LinkedIn or whatever platform, say, love the podcast, would love to discuss opportunities that are available. So it does happen, right? I mean, it doesn't happen every single day, every single month, but that stopped being my purpose, Scott, a while ago, right? It's more about creating Laugh, Lend, and Eat so that it remains a kind of like a namesake in the industry. This is what I've really been trying to accomplish now. But
it's still primarily, is it still primarily focused on you growing your business and your brand? Or have you found that is it kind of become more personal? You're pursuing the things that interest you specifically that you think other people might be interested in?
Honestly, the thing I was thinking when you said that is it's actually grown its own life.
Yep.
Like I feel like Laugh, Lend, and Eat is its own brand now, right? I don't even connect it with Fobby, right? So you got Laugh, Lend, and Eat over here, you got Fobby over here, and you got my mortgage company over here. I don't see them like intertwining anymore. Now in the beginning, absolutely, you're dead on, right? That was the whole goal. I think if I had kept it more focused in the mortgage arena, it probably would be more about growing my business. But because we've kind of took it outside the mortgage industry into meditation and branding and marketing, and we have somebody coming on that's a dietitian momentarily. So it's just taken on a life of its own, and I kind of like the way it's going.
I don't think you're going to like their answers based on you saying that anything that's fried and deep fried. I don't think they're going to be happy with that.
Especially when they find out that I'm no longer a vegan, right? That's going to push them hard.
You should lead off with that. Just say, "Hey, tell me your favorite fried food." Right?
Yeah. Fried tofu. I love fried tofu. I can't go wrong with fried tofu. Put some barbecue sauce on that. You know what I mean? I told this one friend of mine who's a vegan. I said, "You never see a chicken pretend to be a broccoli." You know what I mean? But you always see broccoli trying to be a chicken.
That's funny. That's a good point. But having the well-rounded is so important. And I know, Fraser, that's a lot as far as EPM is the whole well-rounded, to be able to really look at that. And people are looking at that. It's like, it's not just all about work. It's not just all about my business, but being able to have that.
And what I love about that is you just did it and you just got it started. You don't have to have it completely figured out. You just need to have enough motivation to get out there and do it. And then there really is sort of this it's not a synergy, but it gets a life of its own, and it starts to evolve, and the people that get involved in it, and then all of a sudden it has its own little feedback loop, and now you're just a participant in this really cool conversation that you created.
And so right. And it's interesting because I just finished writing my book now, by the way. It's coming out, I think, either September, October with the help of Christine and Candy, right?
Okay, what's the name? What's the name of the book?
Oh, it's Falling Forward, Mishaps on the Road of Happiness.
Oh, nice.
So it's coming out. It was supposed to be next month, but I think I'm going to push it back to October because, it's got to be perfect, right? Just kidding. But I was getting at when you just said that, Scott, was I was thinking to myself, like, when I started writing the book, you don't know where the road's going to go. Right. You just kind of start on it, right? And you just, so often in my past, I always want to be perfect. Like if it's not perfect, and it's interesting. Side note, rabbit hole, right? I had a really good friend of mine who's really well known in this industry, wants to do a podcast, but he wants to have everything look like this from day one, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, it doesn't happen that way. Like you kind of have to find, what works for you and just start. Grab a microphone, grab a Zoom account, and go for it.
Yep.
And then you'll see, later on you can get the sound tiles and the actual lighting and all the other stuff can follow later on if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be there on day one.
Yeah, there's a Voltaire quote, perfection is the enemy of good.
Yeah.
And it's so accurate. That's some old school for you, Ray.
Yeah.
Really old school.
Well, it's true, especially when podcast is audio, right? So, we do video, but we don't really ever show the video. We didn't made a conscious effort, like, hey, we don't really care. So when like guests would come on, they would be like, hey, am I going to be on? I'm like, no, we maybe use like a clip, or something to promote, but for the most part, it's just audio. And so don't worry, it doesn't have, as long as the audio is good, it's not scratchy, it's not hard. As long as you have the audio okay, start your podcast and do whatever. I mean, I had terrible backdrops, and we just didn't really care about any of that stuff. But just do it, because here's the thing: is the content is going to matter. If you look at any great creator, any great content creator in our industry, or you look at the Gary Vaynerchuk's or the other, others and everyone else, look about when they first started, and they'll all tell you it's terrible. My first videos and anything that I did first was awful. It sucks compared to like what I'm doing now, right? And if you look at anybody in this industry for long enough, or in marketing or whatever, their stuff sucked in the beginning too, and they'll tell you that. Doesn't matter. Is like eventually you'll create that following as long as your content's good. That's all that matters, right? You can have the worst logo, the worst everything. As long as your content's good, people will listen.
And to that point, by the way, on my very first episode with Barry Habib, we did the entire 45, 50 minutes where he talked about the speakers and all that stuff. I never hit the record button. I swear to God. And I hung up, and then Barry's gone, and I'm in the little studio by myself. I'm like, what's going to happen with Zoom? Like, I didn't know what was going on, right? And I'm having this meltdown. I called up Christine Beckwith. I said, Christine, you're not going to believe. She goes, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. So, I mean, later on, that became a big joke, because we put a big red button in our studio now called the Barry button for me to hit the record button.
Barry button.
That's funny.
I really want to build on what Fraser said real quick, because we are our own worst critics. And it's not that what you're putting out there sucks. It's just that it might not be fully formed, right? Because I at least in what I'm hearing from you, Fobby, is what you start with and what your original idea is, it evolves as you dive into this sort of unknown territory. It's something new. And I don't know if it can really suck because it's unknown. And the very fact that you're doing it is the accomplishment. That what your content is absolutely evolves, because you'll start to get feedback and you'll make mistakes. But it's so important to understand that there's no such thing as something that doesn't have any mistakes or that's absolutely perfect. It just doesn't exist.
Well, every episode has a mistake in it. Every episode that we do, there's something that's going on. You know what I mean? Like we just recorded an episode a few days ago, and there was some construction crew because the air conditioner flooded in the building, right? And you're getting this, you're like, gotta walk through it, just figure this thing out, right? Just unless we gotta re-record everything over again. There's always gonna be something that's not
which is less than not pressing the record button. So you're getting better.
Yeah, I'm getting better. 42 episodes, I know how to hit the record button.
That's the best.
But yeah, I definitely think there's always going to be improvements. There's, look, even we're going into the end of our second season and third season coming up in January. We're looking at reformatting some of the things. We're thinking about using one of the live social media platforms. So to kind of go live at the same time we're recording, maybe shorten it up, Ginger, just to see how that goes, because we've got the stats for now 40 some odd episodes, and our average listener is listening for 17 minutes. Okay. So we know that stat. So why don't we accommodate that stat by giving them more content in the first 20 minutes, that kind of stuff. So we're trying to accommodate. We're always changing. We're always going to try to develop. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as, kind of like it's always going in the right direction, right? You don't want to go in the wrong direction.
Well, I always think that if you're still interested in it, it's moving in the right direction. And I think that's important, is it needs to still be fun. As soon as it starts feeling like work, and you kind of lose that original passion and why you did it. But it sounds like the way that your program evolved is it's really just become just this playground for you to explore these ideas and these things that are outside of the grind. Right?
Yeah. We're definitely, I like the way you put that, because it definitely is a playground. I definitely invite guests that I want to hang out with. That's absolute. And one of the things that I really learned is that I like these panel discussions. We had a realtor panel on here a few months ago when the market was really hot. We had 3 or 4 realtors on there from all over the country, California, Texas, Minnesota. I mean, Kentucky. I mean, just you name it, they were there, right?
Nice.
And it was a great discussion talking about the inventory being affected nationwide, and how everyone is being affected no matter where you are. That was a great conversation to have at that time. And it was, it was needed. It was so no one could say, well, you don't know what it's like in the DC market. You don't know what it's like in the Atlanta market. No, it's this way all across the board.
Well, the nice thing by doing the video and to do it live, and Scott, you have yours that you do every week live that you're streaming, and you have, you have your main speakers that you have on, your that just like we do, but then you have guests on as well. And by doing that in the panel, Fobby, to your point, it makes it a lot easier to have that conversation. So, if you're thinking about doing video and you're struggling with ideas on what to do, having something like this takes that away to where all the pressure isn't on you, where you can say, okay, this is what we're going to talk about. And, Scott, when you started doing yours, how long have you been doing your vlog cast? You do your live stream?
It's coming up on 2 years. It's coming along, and it's interesting. This is a great, interesting conversation because we're sort of doing some rebranding right now too. Because we were talking when we talked to was it Martin from Mortflix a couple of weeks ago or last week. And so we were kind of talking about, so our podcast actually got picked up on a local cable station in Los Angeles. Like they saw it and they wanted to run it on Saturday mornings. And we're like, okay, that's weird because it's just us screwing around all the time. And then we were kind of looking at the Mortflix, and then we were like, you know what? We kind of felt like we were getting into a little bit of a rut, and we were kind of pigeonholing our conversations, and kind of like exactly what you were saying, Fabio, is it feels like it's expanding into something different and maybe pulling it outside the industry a little bit. But bringing in people from outside the industry, I think, is absolutely brilliant, because honestly, that's where I've learned my most valuable lessons in my business is from people not in my business, just in other businesses, and how sometimes their perspectives apply to things. So yeah, I mean, we've been doing it just almost 2 years now, and it's evolving. We're going through a little bit of a rebrand right now, but I mean, we knew full blown when we started ours, we were just like, we sat around and talked to each other and just had these conversations, and we just said, man, let's just turn on the camera and let's just do this, and let's just see if people are interested in this conversation.
And they're wild conversations too.
Yeah, and we have and they're exactly the same offline as they are online. They're just ridiculous. And we enjoyed having these types of conversations, and we were just like, I just wonder how much different influence and different perspectives we can get if we're having this in public.
Yeah.
And yeah, but we had no expectations of this. We'll just say, let's see where it goes. And the next thing you know, it's almost 2 years now when we're actually trying to do things purposely. Imagine that.
I think it is good to have outside industry people come in and talk about stuff, because it gives people inside the industry that maybe listen to our shows something else to talk about and listen to, right?
Yeah.
So like for me, like bringing in David Gendelman was amazing for the meditation exercises, because you're not always going to look for David Gendelman if you're not in the meditation world, right? But having that availability because you're a mortgage loan officer and you stumble across the Laugh Lend and Eat podcast and you listen to it, all of a sudden you have a way into meditation. Now you're looking into getting grounded while you're sitting at your desk. How can I do that and still, have a nice balanced life because of that? So I think those are always positives.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and in having, so we're talking about all these different opportunities, and if someone's watching this thinking, okay, you all are doing this, everybody's already doing, whether it's a stream or a blogcast or a podcast. So is there room for me to be able to start something? And Fraser, you and I had this conversation, when I had talked about starting a podcast. And you said there's plenty of room, right?
Yeah, no, plenty of room, because look, there's, this is an old number, so I know it's more, but there was like 1.5 million podcasts out there in the United States, like in 2017 when I started really looking at that stuff. And I'm sure it's either at least the same or more now, but yet, when we started our podcast, it didn't take us too long to start getting, 100, 200, 500, 800, 1,000 downloads per episode. Right. And it happens because, you got to think that our industry it's not like something everyone capitalizes on mortgage and real estate. Right. I mean, there is a lot more podcasts in our industry today than there was when we started. But at the same time, there's so much more that goes into it. And like I said before, as long as your content is good, then you will have it. There's an audience for you. Right. And, look, like Fobby started way after we did, and he's got an audience. Right. And so there's always room for good content, and there's always room for thought leadership. Right. And look, I could say that, confidently. With you, Ginger, people are going to want to hear what you have to say, right? There's a reason why you speak at a ton of different events. It's a reason why you're a published author. There's a reason for everything. Same with Scott and what he does with his blog and all that stuff, and Fobby, being a leader in the industry. So there's always room if you are a thought leader and you have good content. So, and there's never a too late to start. May be a longer, ride up to the top and where you want to get. The longer you wait. But it's never too late, and there's plenty of room for good content.
And there's another thing, Ginger, with that is that the average podcast only has about 7 episode life cycle. Just an FYI on that.
Interesting.
So I know the number of 1.5 million and 2 million and so on. A lot of those podcasts are really not in circulation anymore. So Molly Rulin, she has a Hardcast Media out here in DC, and she does all this stuff. So she was walking me through all this stuff, and the average podcast has 7 episodes, and then they're done.
Well,
Which I don't blame them for, by the way. I don't blame them. I blame Fraser, but I don't blame them for quitting after 7 episodes.
So I want to build on this a little bit, because I heard another stat the other day, Fobby, that goes exactly with that you have to have something like, if you have more than 20 episodes, you're in the top 1% of podcast producers in the country or the world. It's like most people don't go that long. The other thing that I wanted to say is, in terms of competition, there's some aspects to marketing and finding the right audience and having the right message for the right audience. But when you're doing content marketing, which is what you're doing, sharing your expertise, being a thought leader, this is an attraction mechanism. So you're not competing, because we're not all saying our message is not commoditized, right? We have different perspectives and thoughts and ideas. And so you're attracting people that resonate with your vision or your values or the way that you express your ideas. And that there is no competition for you when you put yourself out there, because there's only one you. So this entire thing is through your vision. There will never be 2 exact podcasts and somebody has to choose. Yeah. So as long as you're putting yourself out there so that people can find you, and that's the interesting thing about this, is by doing this, you're just not being selfish with the joy that you create in your world. You're putting it out there in a medium so that other people can discover that and then be attracted to it, and then they become listeners and they become fans and followers. And it really is really, really interesting, and it's almost counterintuitive when you think about, I'm going to do X because I want the result to be Y. It really isn't. It's like, I'm going to do X because I love it and I enjoy it, and I'm going to do it in a medium where other people can discover that I'm doing this, and then over time that it starts to grow. There's an interesting synergy that happens just by simply doing it.
Yeah, to that point, I'm sorry to cut you off, but only 5% of the people are actually executing. So I always tell this to people, I always tell this to people, like, if you're listening to me right now and there's like 50 or 100 people, only 5% are actually going to execute what we just talked about.
Yeah.
And Jason probably knows this because I see him out there talking all the time, right? And how many people are actually executing marketing ideas or this idea or that idea, right? And we all got great ideas. All 4 of us combined together probably have some amazing ideas. 5% are executing. So what I always try to tell people is, you are not competing against 100% of the people. You're only competing against 5%. That's it. And so that's a very small number of people that, like other people make podcasts. That's great. I think just like Jay said, there's so much room. There's so much, to your point, Scott, there's so much talk that isn't out being shared about it. Someone could come up with a really great idea and really just be dynamic with it. And we don't know about them right now because they're trying to be perfect.
Yeah. Their message isn't perfect yet.
Yeah.
We're waiting.
And consistency.
Yeah.
So I put the podcast up there. So it's Laugh, Lend, Eat, and you can find it. Actually, it's on this Apple Podcast.
Wow,
so
nice.
make sure and grab it. Go on there. And next month we're gonna get into some of the technical semantics that go into producing things like that. So a lot of what we've talked about in today, and great information, Fobby, that you've shared. And we appreciate you coming on, be able to.
Thank you for
share
having
that.
me.
But we want to get into really, it's like, okay, what do you need to get? What do you need to do? What do you need to have as far as the technical side to get it started? And Fraser talked about, it's simple, but there are some things you have to, have in order to get that going. And so that's going to be our focus in September. Next week, we have our guest who were supposed to be on last week. And we had to cancel that show for a variety of reasons. And so, Scott, you want to talk about our guests for next week? Because I know that they're guests that you invited on.
Yeah, it's Josh Lewis and Jeb Smith. Josh Lewis, and full disclosure, is a business partner of mine and Bywise Mortgage. But Jeb Smith is a local real estate agent, and he started a YouTube channel when COVID started. And it pretty much exploded to, he's pretty close to 40,000 subscribers now. And every week they do a 2-hour live Facebook or YouTube live Q&A. And what has come out of that has just been absolutely amazing and just absolutely fascinating. And I think it's something that a lot of people could do out there. They're worried about getting online and doing things themselves, but partnering with people in vertical industries and creating something of value. And this is a consumer direct approach. So unpacking some of the mysteries of this stuff using multiple verticals, going consumer direct. And it's really had some amazing results. So it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because, part of the things is that people are actually paying for the and then
we'll keep that, and we'll surprise you with what that looks like. I was tempted to tell you what that was, but no, it's shocking the impact you can make on people's lives without even really knowing it, just by talking about the stuff that we love.
Yep, absolutely. So very good. Okay, so we'll close out this session. For those of you who are watching live or watching our recording, thanks for tuning in. Fobby, thank you so much for joining. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me, Ginger and Scott and Fraser. Thank you.
and we'll look at starting that show, Blaming Fraser.
Yeah, we gotta. I actually just thanked him instead of blaming him. See, that's a.
I want to be the first guest.
That's the new podcast.
I think we
blame me for your success.
I'll
take blame for the success.
Blaming Fraser. Either that or that could be an indie rock band. Either or take a pick. Blaming Fraser. You know what I mean?
And with that, let's get something to eat.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Okay, guys, have a great weekend. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.